be a cool study to do to see the drop off from sprinting without a ball to sprinting with a ball, and then you set up some different things, and you could do a long-term study. It would be pretty cool to see, because my guess would be that the best athletes, their time with a ball is a lot closer to their time
Yes.
without a ball than the lesser basketball players.
That was Bobby Whyte, and you're listening to the Just Fly Performance Podcast. Today's podcast is sponsored by Lila Exogen Wearable Resistance. Exogen is used by coaches such as Randy Huntington and Chris Corfist, and is an incredible tool in overloading the angular momentum and speed aspect of human movement. You can get 25% off of Exogen sleeves by heading to lilateam.com and using the code JustFly25. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. Thanks for tuning in, and I'm excited to welcome back to the show Bobby Whyte. He is an athletic performance and basketball skill enhancement coach. He has experience on multiple sides of the athletic development equation. So strength, speed, skill development, general physical development, and he's also widely known for the good drills ideology and training system. Athleticism is a wide spanning pyramid. There are many aspects to be considered, many buckets to be checked in terms of what needs to be filled and how do we move forward throughout an athlete's career. On today's show, Bobby will speak on his process to help take basketball players to the edge of their ability, working from his perspective as a basketball skills and athletic development coach. He also keys into the 7 first principles that he uses and refers to in that journey to maximize an athlete's ability. This and so much more on the show today. I really love these conversations because they help us to see the big picture and help push that envelope on the entirety of the athlete training process. Excited to get this show going. Let's get to episode 410 with Bobby Whyte. Bobby, it is awesome to have you back, man. I know you just said you were at a track meet. I think it was your first one, like this past weekend or something like that.
Yeah, I spend hours upon hours in gyms watching basketball, but I have a niece who has found some success in track. She's committed to JMU next year. She's going to go there, run cross country and track. And yesterday she was trying to beat her high school's 800-meter record. She already has a 1600 and whatever 2 miles is, but she went there. She missed it by a second, but it was cool to see because I've never done it. So
yeah, we were just talking a little bit before we pushed record about like the types of thinking too that go into like being a basketball player versus a track. I mean, decathlon's a little bit different. Maybe, you have 10 events, but if it's just one event, you can really dig into that one thing versus basketball. I mean, you could dig into one thing for basketball, but you have, like you said, I mean, I don't know if it's infinite, but it is many, many, many skills in many. It's kind of like chess, I guess. Chess is kind of infinite in how many different ways you could play things out. So it's an interesting way of thinking of one sport versus the other. And I think it's good to mentally exercise that a little bit too. Just because, especially track could be like the weight room too. It's like singular things. Track's a little more complex. You have more of the biomechanical pieces. And then basketball, it's like, well, how do you approach that? If you're trying to be technical, it's interesting to think about.
yeah, listening to you unpack a little bit how you would put 4 inches on somebody's high jump and like the amount of thought and focus you could put into one event like that, my mind immediately went to events in basketball and could I write them down? And the reality is, thinking about it here, I couldn't, right? I don't know if it's infinite, but my mind doesn't work from event. There are buckets that we want to train, and there are qualities that, most great basketball players have, but like there isn't one event. And it's just a different framework of thinking, I believe, but it's cool to actually try to wrap my mind around, well, what are the different events and how do we approach that? And I always come back to it's really kind of a case-by-case basis and who's in front of me and what are their limiting factors and how we're going to raise those.
Yeah, I like this is kind of a little bit of a mix, as you got a post on like guys, they were long jumping the lane basically. And I think just doing a layup or even just holding the ball, I don't even remember. But anytime I see something that's kind of like track and basketball mixed together, I'm just like, yes, this is awesome. Like, I wish I was at the gym doing this. I sometimes tried to do that just for fun when I was playing basketball, just because, I don't know, it's just kind of fun to do that.
Yeah, I laugh because if I took a group of basketball players to the track and we worked on long jumping. Nobody would think twice. Oh, they're working on jumping. But I put a basketball in somebody's
Yeah.
hand or just do it on the court and it like blows people's minds that it's like this completely different thing. I'm like, if we just did this, down the street at the track, you guys would say we're working on athleticism and jumping.
Mhm.
But because I have a ball in their hand, it's like, you're never going to do that in a game, right? We get that all the time. But the reason for that is I'm challenging them, right? We're jumping from distance, right? Going fast up into it. And I didn't start with them just holding the ball. I started with just seeing how far they could take off and successfully make a layup. But what I saw was almost a fear creep in.
Mm.
And I knew these players had a lot more capacity, right, in terms of speed, right? And I knew they could operate faster and take off faster. But because so much of their focus was on the finish, it was slowing them down, right? Because they were so worried about finishing the ball that it would actually slow them down. So what I did was take the thought and the focus of finishing away, and we're going to do the same drill. Now you're just going to jump as far as you can with the ball in your hand and no thought of the finish. And you saw them almost immediately start jumping 3-4 feet further or whatever it was. And then now they're building, right? They're getting more comfortable operating at that speed, taking off at that distance. And now the second I bring them back to the finish, now it's, the success rate went through the roof.
Yeah. So much. This is like, it's interesting because I played basketball and I love basketball. It's one of the sports I will watch like the highlights of. I mean, I'll watch highlights from any sport, just with the time I have. It's like, that's the one thing, or one of the things I really enjoy doing. And what I was going to say was well, I'm kind of like, my mind was almost going off track there. I had something I was going to say with like the task based with the like with the ball in your hand or not. But what I was going to say was the fear piece. That's what really stood out to me is coaching youth sports and track, and then linear speed. Fear or overcoming the barrier of fear is so much more important than I think we give it credit for. There was Chris Corfist talks about this a lot with linear speed being a process, or a big part of that process people don't think about is actually eliminating like fear barriers. And he'll do like even like visual stuff for that. Like if your vision is a certain, if like you don't have, he talks about like people with really poor vision usually aren't very fast, which then I instantly go to like, well, I want to watch like the Paralympians who can't see, and they have the guides and like, well, I'm sure when you have a guide, you probably can run faster because you feel safe and you can tie into their rhythm and it's a different way of moving, but just all that being said, like watching youth sports, I'll see the difference between a practice and a game, even for youth sports. And once the fear of, oh, this other team's fast, it changes how you play and how you move, be it either a linear speed pursuit and that feeling of safety in the body and openness to be able to express maximally, or sport being able to open to express maximally. And I think we live in a world sometimes where everything is like compartmentalized into, or well, what's the exact technique with this thing? And I think so often those things emerge when the body can just do its thing. It's like the fear barriers have been taken off. It can act in its environment as it's supposed to. And now it's like, I think sometimes, long story short is I think we don't pay credence to that piece as much as we should, which I'm sure that connects to you're not going to do this in the game. Well, it's like, this could break down that fear barrier velocity so that it can open things in the game.
100%. That's, I talk about edge of ability all the time, but what I've seen through doing this last 10, 11 years, whatever it is, working with novice athletes all the way to McDonald's All-Americans, and everything in between, the top performing athletes are willing to go into the unknown, right? They don't have fear of the unknown. And kids are after confidence, and it's like, I just want to be more confident. Is it really a lack of confidence, or are you really just full of fear, right? Because LeBron James is one of the most confident players we've ever seen, right? As anybody in the NBA is. He doesn't shoot from half court, not because of a lack of confidence, right? He's confident enough to come up every time and jack it from half court and think nothing of it, right? He's confident enough to do that. Why doesn't he do it? Because it wouldn't make sense, right? So I try to frame this to young athletes, right? Is it a confidence issue, or are you just not willing to go into fear? And then it's, again, finding that edge of ability. What's a small step we can take in a direction of that fear, whether it's failure in others, whether it's failure to take off at this speed, whatever it is. And then we just start trying to find different edges, right, to bring them into that fear. And that can be from a physical standpoint, from a speed standpoint, from a skill standpoint, from a mental, emotional, soul standpoint, right? There's all these different abilities that we can start kind of guiding these athletes through. And again, I'm not always telling them what to do, and there's no right or wrong way to do it. depending on my relationship with them, what I see from them, what they've already told me in terms of what their vision is, right? And all these kids, like I have kids, I put ownership on every single young athlete that I train with. How good do you want to be, right? If you tell me you want to be a professional basketball player, right? Okay, I've seen that level. I've been at that level. I've worked at that level, and it's a scary level. We need to start getting you on that, on that continuum, right? And that's what we do.
Yeah. The with the task based was something I was curious about as well. With like, watching basketball players, and it's the basketball court and the stimuli is what they're used to, and they maybe have the rhythm of the ball to kind of like tune in, and then they take off. I'd be curious what it would look like if you brought them out, the foreign environment, track and field, runway, board. It's just interesting to think about that. One of the things that's been, that's really been, I mean, I've always had my interest peaked with how people run and in their environment and the task and opposing players of the ball. Even if you just throw a tennis ball and sprint after it, usually mechanics are actually better than if it's just like, hey, just go sprint, because you're kind of at the mercy of if you have like programs in your forebrain or anything that might slow you down. It's like you have something to lock onto. But it's interesting. Yeah, it's just interesting to think about, basketball players with that. And then, like you mentioned too, though, I did think it was really interesting, like the taking the fear of needing to finish out of the system, like starting, like it's like, how can we make this a high velocity exercise, but how can we reduce the complexity so you can be fast first, and then okay, now once you can be fast, now we'll start to put in some of these other pieces.
Yeah, and a regression of that would even be long jumping without a ball. If I have some young athletes coming in, we're going to go long jump. You have to clear the paint, right? And we do this all the time. This could be in our warm up or whatever. You have to jump the entire length of the paint. The paint is lava, right? Cover the paint, get to the other side. No basketball. Step up from that. Now let's give them a basketball, and you're not even near the basket. You're going sideways across the paint, right? And just doing that. And there's no finish, but we're going fast, working at speed. No ball. Introduce a ball. Now have somebody chase them. Now while you're jumping over, do a 360. Now we start to bring in creativity. Now when you're clearing the paint, put the ball through your legs twice. Now you're doing, and that's how my mind works. And people are like, what do you do? It's this is how my mind works. I meet them where they're at, or I start where I think they're at with, a regression or wherever we're at. And then I just continue to change it. I continue to manipulate it. And some things don't work out, but the more I'm willing to step into this kind of experimental, role of guidance with these athletes, I start to see it. It doesn't matter as much about what I'm doing, but the intention behind what I'm doing. And that's bringing them to the edge of their ability in the direct line of what their goals and dreams are. That makes sense.
It does. And you've told me this before, but what age range do you train again? I've forgotten, because it's wider than just like, high school and college. You work with younger athletes as well.
Not as much anymore. We used to have beginner groups, and I saw that I could do like maybe one a week, and then we kind of just dropped that to focus on most of our kids are now high school, college athletes.
Okay. Yeah. I was just curious because the way you talked about it, it sounded like, like I see the same thing in like a soccer practice. Like I was just thinking about when I'd warm up the team, it's always like an animal warm up. Like, what animal are you? But it's just funny because a lot of those kids, they'd be like a bear or like, something that hops on one leg, or a fish. But a lot of those kids just wanted to like long jump. Like if there's a line and they're running to the line, the kids who are more athletically disposed, who kind of just have that athletic ability and desire, like it's like, hey, it's a line. I'm going to long jump over that just for fun. No ball. It's, we're here for soccer, but they just want to do that. And so you had kind of reminded me of that idea. And then also, like youth and just early development as a time to take like a basic thing and explore it like every way you can, so I think that's, you had mentioned, it's funny because people say, I'm almost unpacking this, right? Like, oh, you don't do that in the game, so why do it? And it's like, maybe it's like the nerdy way to think about it, but it's like, an attractor is like, well, here's the basic technique of what you would do. And the fluctuators are all the different, like, other things that could happen that lead up to that final technical position or whatever. It's like it's all the flavor, it's all the English you put on it. It's all the little nuances. And to me, it's like, creativity and a creative sport. I think it thrives on building out those. And I hope if there's motor learning people and I'm wrong with how I explain that, I'm sorry. But to me, that's how I understand a good piece of it. And I just think that being able to understand that and build build the whole system out instead of just the endpoint, because I think we get fixated on only endpoints and not everything that goes into that or all the art outside of it.
I think if I'm if I'm limiting myself to work to train when I'm working with athletes, if I'm limiting myself to what they can currently do in a game, how am I ever going to get them better? At one point on the spectrum, you couldn't do anything in the game, right? I don't care what the game is. You were young, you had no experience in this game, you couldn't do anything. So that idea of you're never going to do that in a game, or this person is never going to do that in a game, why train it? Well, when they can't do anything. They can't do anything in the game. So I just want all they can do right now is a right hand layup. So you want me to just stay with right hand layups right now because their capability is just that. We don't want to expand upon those capabilities. We don't want to expand upon those capacities. And we're not dumb. And I think we give far less credit to humans, to young athletes in general than we should, and how smart they are. Right? They know that they're not going to jump from the 3-point line in a normal thing and try to cover 20 feet in the air in a layup, but by having that ability, by being able to take off at full speed, by not having any fear of operating at their max speed, taking off from an insane distance with a short ground and being able to control their body fluidly in the air and have the wherewithal to find the focus and put the ball in the basket, you have the ability to do that. What is a carryover from that ability to other aspects of the game that you might actually do, right? And in talk about instilling confidence in athletes, we throw crazy stuff at them. We throw chaos at them because that is what you watch the best athletes in the world play sports. I don't care if it's basketball, anything. They make highly, highly complicated things look very, very simple, right? They know how to create simplicity in their games. That's what they do. But it's not simple. They just make it look simple because they're so good.
Yeah. The with creativity too, like what you're talking about, with all the different, like there's so many ways that you can do the move, be creative, and it's like this huge movement library. And I think about this with sports, like, well, one, if it's like just a general year-round setting and an athlete's doing it, I don't know, let's say you're a volleyball player or something. Like Lee Taft has said, every athlete who doesn't play soccer should do soccer in the off season or something, just because of the density of abilities and change of directions and the footwork and the things happening low to the ground. And I think of that, and I would agree with that. And I watch like youth soccer versus other youth sports, and I look at just the density of things happening, athletic things happening, and soccer is so huge. But I feel like basketball is almost unique in the sense of like if you label the sport, soccer is like footwork and agility in the real sense, not like I guess if you want to call it just manufacture agility. But to me, basketball, once you have the basic ability or a level, it's like that. But it's like creativity. It's like expression. Like that's almost the word I would put. It's like that's like a hallmark of basketball is creative expression. And you get that in soccer too, but I don't think there's quite as much room for it as in other sports. I was curious your thought on that with the creativity in your practice, the way that basketball could donate to like football or other things. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, the top. I'm going to look at the sport. And I'm going to look at the top athletes at the sport, and even the same position athletes in the sport play the game completely differently. Right? You look at the way Jokic plays relative to the way Giannis plays.
Yeah,
they have different games. Right? They have different genetic. They have different physical characteristics. Right? But they're big 7 feet guy, and the way they operate is completely different from one another. And they're both highly successful. Then you look at point guards, the way Kyrie Irving plays relative to how Steph Curry plays. Completely different, similar size, similar, probably physical characteristics, not exactly sure, but you watch them play and they have an identity with how they play, and it is a clear they approach the game differently and are both highly successful. So when it comes to that, I look at it now, well, how do I guide players in that direction, right? And it's less telling them what to do and more giving them opportunities to figure out what to do. And that it has so much more value and meaning to them, right? When they get that little spike, or when they get that little spark, or something finally clicks, and it came from them searching, it came from them taking permission, right? Or like taking ownership over what they're after. They've got this big vision out here, and it's like, how can I just keep pushing them a little bit, guiding them, nudging them, attacking them sometimes, whatever it is, to get this out of them so they can start to develop, right? They're going to be constrained by, their height, their weight, their speed, their this. We all have our different physical constraints, and it's like, now how can we leverage what we have? And there is not one way to do that.
Yeah. And I know that does exist in all sports, but it would be interesting to try to quantify that, because it does seem like you said, to me, it seems that basketball is like the pinnacle of that, like the variability of the positions and the players versus, especially maybe something that's a little bit more like football. That's a little bit more like chess-like in a way, I mean, there's obviously still variability there, but, and maybe more like the quarterback position than other positions. I'm not 100% sure, but it does seem like if you look at the idea of athlete-centered, I've brought that up. Austin Yoakum and I were talking about that recently. Austin's very big into that. And if you looked at all the things that these sports can give you, it does seem like basketball, especially as you're talking about it, is a fantastic way, if it's brought up correctly, to find your identity. How do you move? How do you play? What's your superpower? How can you be confident in your superpower? And I mean, it's just funny because as I'm talking about this, I'm like, man, I wish what a different experience for me it would have been, growing up and thinking about it that way versus. I mean, again, I think coaches are well-meaning. I had a good experience, but I think that we learn as we go, and I think there's so much to be found with that.
Yeah, and the hardest part is the beginning. Like if I'm trying to unlock athletes, right? If I look at my role in this whole thing of what I'm doing with athletes, I want to unlock them, right? I don't want to create a dependence on me, right? Either the merit of all of this is, what are they doing when they're in the competition, right? What are they doing when they're actually in their performance? How do they play the game not in my gym, right? Not with me, when they're with their high schools, with their teams, right? That is where the merit is, right? And how can I best prepare them for that? I don't want them, yes, it's great. They succeed in my gym. Yes, we put inches on the vert. Yes, we get them faster. Yes, they develop handle. Yes, they can shoot the ball better, in my gym. But what are they doing when they actually go compete? And that is my focus.
Yeah. It's, I'm thinking too, it's almost like, basketball or sport are chaotic things. It's like the more options that are available, it's almost like the more room there is for you to find that part of yourself. Compared to maybe just like the simplest option all the way on the other end would be, hey, just sprinting, 100-meter dash. I mean, there's still options there for sure, but it's a lot less than like, hey, I'm the point guard in basketball, the shooting guard, and there's all this variability. But I was even thinking in track, something simple, this is just where my mind goes. It's like, well, what about like the decathlon or different events where there is room, there's more options, and there's more room to figure out what makes you tick here. Like the hurdles in track, most coaches coach one way to do it, but then Aries Merritt, world record holder, like he's got a unique swimming action. And some athletes do that, but it's almost like the idea of, as you have my wheels turning, it's almost like finding the events that have the options and presenting it to an athlete in a way, hey, try this way. What feels good? Like how does your engine tick? And giving athletes enough of those things that have variability to give them more room to find themselves and that like journey of discovery. So I know we had a lot of questions. I'm like, you got my mind going on this, Bobby, though, because I think it's
now
so
you say the word options, and it's like so many athletes have the options, but they don't know how to calibrate those options. They don't know how to use those options. I've got a 6'9" kid, giant windmills, stronger than an ox. You look at him walk through the door and it's like, wow. And then you watch him play and he has no idea how to use what he has, right? Because maybe it hasn't been enough time, in the arena, hasn't been enough time, hasn't had enough people push him into, that maybe there's some fear attached to him, right? I have no idea, but it's like, he's got the options. They're there. Now, how do we get him using those options? How do we get him understanding those options? And I don't know. You got my brain's going too.
Yeah. Maybe a good way to go with the question list. I might have had this at the end, but I think it will feed well into what we're talking about is, I mean, you had a post too, and this is, my mind thinks about the future of the field and where it is now. I mean, you do everything. You're the skills coach, you're the strength coach, you infuse speed and game speed options into the training itself. And before we pushed record, you were talking about track being different, that mindset of just zoning into one thing, that mental space of just going into one thing. And what I wanted to ask is, based off what we're talking about, you see this development of edge of ability on the court. With the weight room, is it something that works its way there in any way that's specific, or is that general in its own sense? Like the ability to hold a lunge for 3 minutes and just focus, and have concentration. Is there anything there that does interplay, or is that general in its own way? I'd love to hear you expand on that.
Interplay in terms of what?
Like, I guess if an athlete was seeking a certain edge of their ability on the court, and there was a certain area that you needed them to explore and find themselves a little bit more in, and you were working on something in particular, is there anything in you go just back to the general, the gym setting, the weight setting? Is there anything there that also feeds into that mindset, or because you're doing all the skill in the court, does the weight room basically just stay general? Is it just it seems like a very simple option to keep it that way.
We're trying to create, right? Yeah, we're trying to maximize their physical capacity in the weight room, and it's general. Throughout 10 years of going down the contrast to triphasic to easy strength to 1x20 to this to that to this to that to experimenting with everything, I have come to the conclusion that they all work when adhered to. Okay, and no matter, and this is not diminishing the role of S&C. This is not poo-pooing strength trainers. I am a strength trainer. I was a professional strength coach in China for a professional team out there. I've worked with numerous colleges as a strength coach. I am a fan of the profession, but that I am not going to get players that the breaker on them of whether they're going to get to where they want to be or not. I don't believe it's going to happen in the weight room. Now that we can help them, we can maximize capabilities in the weight room. We can get them stronger. We can get them jumping higher. We can get them faster, and we hit all those buckets, right? Pick a modality. I've probably tried it or read it or went down it. We keep it general. We want you stronger. We want you faster. Now, if that at the same time I'm working with somebody and I see something that doesn't look right, or I see a bucket that hasn't been addressed, we can on the fly regulate and change our programming for them. But typically, the athletes I'm dealing with on a day-to-day basis have a very, very low training age, right? And we don't need anything crazy.
Yeah.
Typical strength, like a strength session, they get an hour. We're coming in anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes is some type of creative game, some type of fun warm-up, some type of movement. It could be a more jumping focused. It could be more speed focused. We're going to hit some athletic things without a ball in their hand, right? Could be max effort, sprints, varied distances, could be jumping for distance, could be jumping for height, could be jumping creatively, could be tag, could be you name it. That's, somewhere 15 to 20 minutes. And then we get in 20 to 30 minutes strength work.
Today's podcast is sponsored by the Plyomat. The Plyomat is not only an incredible vertical jump and reactive strength index testing device, but it also is an incredible training device. The Plyomat not only allows single response jumps, but also the chaining of multiple mats together. So you can use it for bounding, multiple series of hurdle hops. You can get not only height, but reactive strength for a multi-jump situation. It's an incredible, again, testing and training tool, and you can learn more at plyomat.net. Yeah. I might have mentioned this before we were on the call, but something that's really I've been thinking about a lot lately, and I think different ideas mirror themselves in different places and spaces in the athlete performance space and in life. But like, there needs to be, I think a lot of people listening to this are familiar with the idea of the body as a series of stable and mobile joints. You need stability in particular joints so that other things can be mobile. And I think it's not necessarily a perfect way of looking, but I think there's definitely truth in that. And I would say that in the same thing in training, you can't have every single thing in your program be super complex and super variable. There needs to be these like stable places that can serve as a launch pad for the creativity. And I look at like French contrast too. You mentioned contrast, and I get it, like if you're doing all the creative stuff on the court, like, to go and try to be, there's only so many places that can be done in a particular setting. But I like the idea of French contrast because it's got like two fast things and two, strong things, we'll just say. And so it's almost like, you have the creative games on one end, then you have the stable lifting, And then you have all the creativity on the court, and it's almost like you have these different layers of, all right, here's where we can be novel and creative and get attention going. Here's where we just need to be disciplined, do the thing, simple, and then we can be creative again. And so, but it's interesting because I like asking you the question because you do it all. And in so many cases, it's segmented, and it's like, maybe it's like everybody try to be creative, or maybe everyone's try to be really simple. I don't know. I'm sure you get all sorts of different options, but a lot of times I don't think we globally think of that whole system necessarily, if that makes sense. But when it's just you, it's there, like that's the system.
No, I'm laughing. You're explaining what I do probably better than I've ever explained what I do with how you're breaking it into it. But that's exactly it. Our strength training is stable, right? That's it. We're coming in and we're strength training, right? It's simple. That is our stability within, the construct of what we do. And then it's like, that allows us to hit so much of that creativity. And the way I train basketball, like I'm not there's a lot of people out there, just lift and play your sport, right? No, that I don't believe that, but we lift, we do our strength training. The way I train basketball athletes on a court, right? When I'm doing quote unquote skills training with athletes, I am dosing them with so many different athletic qualities, right? It's not just teaching them how to dribble. I'm not just teaching them how to shoot a ball. I'm not just getting them better at what they do with a ball. I am trying to tie everything together on the court. So any gains that we're making in the weight room, any gains that we're making anywhere else from anything else we're doing, I'm trying to calibrate all that on the court. And that comes down to movement, that comes down to, speed with the ball. A lot of times you have these great athletes, but they're hindered by, they don't have an ability to keep the ball up with their body. Right. I take the fastest track athlete in the world that has never dribbled a basketball, and I tell him to go dribble a basketball. He's not going to be able to use any of his athletic potential because he doesn't have the skill of being able to run with a ball. Right. So it's like, how do we match those now? Right. We want to raise that speed bucket, but we also want to raise that specificity of speed bucket with the ball in their hands so they can keep the ball up with their body.
Yeah, and that's just it in so many ways. Well, even just going back to the stable and the mobile, just because the speed and the complexity and the explosiveness, it's all in the context of the court, and in so many ways, I mean, that's how we talk about like natural elite athletes. They develop, like, and this is something where I've just been interested in is what's happened when free play and just developing and having fun and learning it all kind of yourself, in your backyard of the local court is it's less in the system as it used to be. And you can't make that up by going to a specialist who will teach you it exactly, like all right, you're going to do this. There has to be that free play and exploration. Even the way you were talking about how you prescribe movements, there's such a play and exploring element to it. I'm kind of, it's funny, I'm losing my train of thought here. I'm hopefully I'll get it back.
Well, and then there's even like another layer to it, right? We talk about maximizing athletic potential with whatever that may be, and then we want to calibrate it with a ball. But then it's like, can you do that? Can you split a double team when help side defense is coming, right? Be able to take in that information and then get up and dunk on people when they're falling underneath you. Right. Because it's like, yeah, I get somebody dunking from the foul line, but can that guy play the sport? Can that guy, again, like I don't know, split a double team, run down in transition, go around, 3 defenders, dunk when there's people falling underneath him and, understand that? There's a lot going on here. And I would be a fool to think that I can, just, do some simple things with them and expect them to get to the level they want to get to. It doesn't make sense to me. Like they want to play at a level. The athletes that I'm working with, every single one of them wants to play in college or the pro level. And if you go take 10 minutes right now and watch any type of high level basketball, the amount of variability, the amount of chaos, the amount of things going on it's insane. So a lot of my training needs to be insane.
Yeah.
I believe that. And until I get to go to the gym every single day, and right now it's cool that I've been able to take a step back a little bit from me actually running the sessions, and I'm able to see my strength trainer Alex is up on the stage doing his thing. I have somebody else doing the basketball, and I'm still in the gym every single day, the same hours, but I just get to observe and watch and see the relationship between trainer and player, and I get to see the player walk through things, and I'm very quiet and I'm not talking as much. I'm not coaching as much. I just get to observe and watch what's happening. And I can see, because I have that consistency in my life where I have the same athletes coming in and get to see them over a month or a couple year time frame, right? You can't tell me what I'm doing doesn't work because I see it work in front of my eyes, right? That is my value, right? That's the valuable thing to me, that I am watching kids that couldn't do something. Now they can do something.
Mm-hmm.
All right, now they can do that. Let's raise the bar a little bit higher. Let's make it a little bit more complex. What else can they do? What else can they do? What else can they do? And that's it. And with that, with that focus, what else can they do? What else can they do? I'm able to find out that these kids can do far more than they ever freaking imagined.
Yeah. I like what you said about like the extreme level that's needed to really break through. And I think a lot of that is, like you said, you simply watch the NBA and you see the extreme levels that are needed, not just in the athletic ability, obviously, and the physical gifts, the height and the wingspan, but the reaction times, the confidence to be able to move without fear and process your environment. And then you think to yourself, how do I craft this type of piece in a practice setting? And, in my world, a little bit like the physical piece at track, coaches say the same thing. And the coaches who, like Tony Wells, who was a high school track coach in Colorado, who trained so many national champions. That was his thing. Training, this is extreme demands and you adapt to it or die. It was his thing. And Jay Schrader, very similar, in extreme training and adaptation. I think extreme was used, that word was used a lot in his own training, just in the physical piece. But I think, it's like, well, how do you paint the picture of what extreme is? And then how do you deliver that appropriate stimulus to the athletes in front of you with that in mind, that ultimately you're going to need, if this is your goal, you're going to need to be moving at this pace, this velocity, this level of exploration and body control and processing.
And did you watch? I don't know if you watched Ann Edwards. They just beat the Suns.
Mm-hmm.
You watch him at the end of the game, like what he's saying to Kevin Durant.
I didn't see.
Did you see this?
No.
He hits a shot in his face. He goes off on him, and he's destroying KD. I love KD, and it's sad, but he goes down the court and like, you can't guard me, old man. Like me. So like, then there's even that component. Like, are you mentally prepared, right, to handle the level of talk at that level?
Yeah.
These guys are dogs. They are dog. They don't care about your feelings. They don't care about, they don't know. They're killers. So now, again, if I go back and forth on this too, because sometimes I'm driving home and I'm like, I was too mean today. Mm-hmm. But Division I coaches are mean. That I'm preparing that it's a business at this point. Anything above high school level, you're stepping into a business, and it's not, it's not rainbows and fluffy clouds. It's not. And if I'm a nice person, I care about these kids deeply. I live to serve. This is what I do, right? I serve for a living. And again, this is something I might go back on 5 years from now and change, but often I am going to pose myself as the boogeyman for mm-hmm. these kids, because at one point I have not seen a kid that has gracefully gone from, a good high school basketball player to a good college basketball player to a pro basketball player. That is not a graceful experience for anybody that I've seen. You're going to run into a boogeyman. And that's another component. And we can talk speed. This is the stuff that I really think about now, kind of the more of the matters of the heart stuff. Me and you always talk about it. And I know this is a training podcast, not to get off on this, but this is where I always end up going, no matter how hard I don't try, because it is the most important thing to me.
Yeah. I mean, that's coaching.
So let's go back to training.
Yeah, that's okay. No, I mean, maybe we'll get into that a little bit with the pillars, because I know I wanted to add, or 8 core values.
7.
And I hope 7. Sorry. I don't know how I ended up with 8. I was like, 8 seems like a good number. It's like a little mental jump in my head. But maybe we can cover that again. And I agree with you. I mean, the longer I coach, I'm 40 now, and this would have never been on my radar 15 years ago. But working with track athletes, and 15 years ago, it would have just been, is their technique on? Is it off? What mechanical fix do I bring in? Maybe even what constraint. I would think about those things back then as well. And then it kind of turned into like, okay, well, what feeling? Is there certain feelings in the body they need to have? And then I realized you can watch different athletes, and sometimes you can almost tell a little bit about an athlete's like emotional makeup just by kind of looking at them, their facial expression, and some of those things. And you start to notice how they process the event based off that. And then you realize, okay, this is actually the lowest hanging fruit for them, is them being able to make them feel safe, make them feel comfortable. Maybe that's something they compete in. That's just like always the main issue. Being able to take it. We talk about athletes who are coachable. Oh, that athlete's really coachable. Well, there's also, if they're not coachable, it's like there's mental and emotional and a lot of that stuff that's really important. And so for sure, the longer I've been coaching, I mean, that just continually rises on my level of things too. And that's important too, beyond just the event. That's important for working with the athlete as a person too, and all the things that are important that are more than just the sport, being great at the sport. And so, yeah, but I do think it's a thing where it's almost like a pyramid. Like when we all get started, the most attention is like the technical pieces and the drills. And then you get older and you start to go through, see more athletes, work with more athletes, what held them back. Ben Askren talked about this too, a wrestler and MMA fighter. He's like, the higher you go, it's the physical isn't the thing that's holding you back anymore. It's the mind. And it's easy to say the mind. I think that's the one thing. It's easy to say it, but then actually getting into it, it takes so much wisdom and complexity in it. I think people can get lost in that. So yeah, I'm right there with you. I agree. I think it's massively important.
No, and if you address the mind, to me, like that's the hard part, right? And if we focus on that, I think the physical part is easy.
Yeah.
Or maybe not easy, easier. I can get players to jump higher. I can get players faster. I can read a book on, it's not, I mean, how complicated is it? I read your book on speed and implement that. I'm pretty sure the athletes are going to get faster. Is it really more complicated than that? There's a lot of different ways to get people faster, but you have to run fast, right? And then try to run a little bit faster. And how you want to organize that, I'm not here to say your way is right, my way is what, because I use so many different ways, and I'm just constantly trying to learn and say, oh, maybe this is going to get, like, I'm trying to get my athletes, in the most efficient way possible to where they want to go. And I'm open to whatever. If I think somebody has something out there that's better than the way I'm currently doing it, I am looking for that. That's what I want. I want what's best for my athletes. I want to get them as efficiently as possible to where they want to go. And that opens up so much room for learning and exploring and all of this. So yeah.
It's such an important area. And so I'll ask you, the 7 core principles in just a second. But before we do, I did want to get a little bit into, that you already talked about it, and even the long jump example, but especially like the speed piece, just because, and I always remember this. I think I heard this like 10 years ago, Dave Tenney, he used to work for the Seattle, I think, Sounders, the soccer team, or I something like, if I don't know that specifically, it's really not great. But he had said like athletes could get faster off the soccer pitch. Maybe they improve their speed in the off season, and then they could get on the soccer pitch and end up like offsides, because it wasn't integrated yet. And I think the idea just being, can you integrate what you are learning? And that's just, again, with a lot of the, there's just a lot of different hats. And Cameron Joss said, well, communication, if you are working in a department with more people on staff, there just needs to be this interconnection, almost like a one brain in some sense, but in watching your progression, I just saw such a cool progression you did for speed, because you had started with some shin angle work. And then once the athletes had that, it was without a ball, I believe. But once they had it, they instantly had to take it into something with a ball. And I just don't think, that's not how I think our minds are used to thinking about these things necessarily, especially if you're just in like one space or the other, but you're in multiple spaces. So you can see this in a unique way. So tell me a little bit about just, speed and court movement development in stages in light of the needs of the game of basketball.
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit before, but it's, like I was using the jump mat as a timer, right? We set it up at half court. And first, go through our warm up, but now we're doing half court sprints as fast as possible, timing them, giving them, feedback loop, giving them feedback, beat the time. Once we start to see that stagnate a little bit, put a ball in their hand and dribble however you want to dribble. I don't care. And now we can look at the speed. I haven't actually recorded all this and done it. It would be a cool study to do to see the drop off from sprinting without a ball to sprinting with a ball, and then you set up some different things and you could do a long-term study. It would be pretty cool to see, because my guess would be that the best athletes, right, their time with a ball is a lot closer to their time
Yes.
without a ball than the lesser basketball players. And same thing with jumping. I bet if we recorded a max approach jump from a high level basketball player, his max approach jump with a ball in his hand is going to be a lot closer, right, to his actual max. This is something I think I've seen and I think I believe, but I haven't actually tested this. One day, if I have enough time, I will. I don't know if it's going to impact anything I do because I already believe it and train accordingly, but it would be something cool to see. But anyway, back to speed. And then we modify what they have to do with the ball. So it goes from sprint, no ball, sprint, dribble a ball, sprint, dribble a ball through your legs, sprint, dribble, and then I'll give them as you're sprinting, the ball's got to go through your legs, around your back, and then a spin move before you time it. And we have fun. I mean, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I love that because I see that and I wish I would have spent some time doing that because I almost think I got a little bit too fast and maybe it's just the way my mind works. I was always trying to think about the next thing I was going to do before I was just like in the moment with, the ball. Okay, the ball's on my hand or whatever. And it was almost like my raw speed button was almost pushed too far down not too far down because I really appreciated being able to do the things physically I could do. But it's just the basketball, the things with the ball. Like I would have been that guy who without the ball could jump really well and do all these things. But as soon as you put the ball in my hand, the one thing actually that killed me for being a high jumper and wanting to dunk so early, and that was just the thing. And this is why I ended up doing track, just focusing on that one thing. But the thing I could never do that I was like, I should be able to do this was jump over somebody or something and dunk. I mean, I could get my head relatively close to the rim, get my elbow over the rim, windmills. And yet, as soon as something was in my way, it could just be a chair. Like that's not, and if you would have just had me jump regularly, I would easily have cleared the chair. But it's like, as soon as something's in my way, let alone a person, like it just totally shut me down. And
but that's the norm, Joel. Like what you experienced, that is normal. That is right now what happens everywhere because all of the training, right, it removes all of that stuff. Whether it's a person or a chair of this, it's like kids don't do it. Athletes in general, they don't do that, right? That's the thing they want to be able to do. You want to be able to dunk in a game. How much time do you spend practicing dunking in a game, right? And that's why we can create one-on-one drill. I can start a drill and the defense is behind the person. So there's a chase down. Now I got to go dunk with somebody chasing down. Now I had another defender on the baseline. Now I got to, and we just start, and there's no exact rhyme or reason, but it's like, I watch the game a lot. I've grown up in this game. I watch the sport, for enough time that I can envision it in different scenarios that will happen and putting athletes in those scenarios and demanding things like, so I've got you in front of me, Joel, and you can dunk and your head's at the rim. We can play. It only counts if you dunk the ball. That's it. If you lay it in, it doesn't count. Right. And now it's like, and whatever, it could be a 1-on-1 drill, 2-on-2, 3-on-3. Sometimes I go, for this game, it's 3-on-3, but dunks only. Right. And now you are forced to kind of step into that unknown, step into that fear that you've been avoiding.
Yeah.
And that's it. And I do it all the time. Kids come in, they go lay it up. Doesn't count. Doesn't count. That doesn't count. You got to dunk it. That's it. Doesn't count. No basket. Yeah. And they're like, what do you mean? I made no, you need to dunk everything. Go.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Team Builder. You can get a free trial of their training portal software by heading to teambuilder.com and you can use the code JUSTFLY for a 30-day free trial. Sign up today with Team Builder and see what they can do for you for your training programs and your team. Yeah, it's almost like thinking about free play too. I think a lot of people do that. If you watch just kids play, like on the court, it's like, all right, you're the blocker, you're the dunker. And maybe it's like you found that 9-8 rim, that's a little low and bent down. It's like, oh, this is perfect. Yeah. Those things that can emerge sometimes on their own. But I think about that, even how that mentality can go into, like I've seen the mentality even in track and field. I remember one of the best training partners I ever had. Like he definitely brought my level of performance up by just who he was. He was a guy who he was like a 6'6", 6'8" high jumper until he messed up his neck by arching too hard. Like he was extreme. Like he arched his back too much and didn't come out of it and like messed up his neck. But like 24-foot long jumper. And then he also was a good 400 runner, went out to the track just for fun and ran the half mile in close to 2 minutes flat. Like just like hardcore. Like he would run into the wind on purpose and but I remember he was like 5'10" and he did the school dunk contest. And like after the whole thing was done, he still like wanted to put a chair out and jump over it and dunk it. And he could do it so much easier than I could. Like he just had removed limiters that it's funny because even as much as I love physical training, just even that, narrowing down, there was still limiters that I had that guy did not have. And it's just interesting to think about in that context as well. But then, yeah, basketball, like, that would have been a great game for me. I would have loved that. Yeah, maybe I would have had to start on like an 8-foot hoop or something, just to get my confidence up, or I don't know, and then it slowly goes up. But that's a lot of what I do now, to be honest. Like I will do, if I'm jumping to a vertex, even I'll put something in front of it because I kind of want to have to. It's almost like, look, Joel, I'm 40. I'm not gonna hit my head on the rim. Like it's sadly. I mean, it'd be great if I did, but I want to find ways to mentally, those things that held me back in the past, I want to find a way to engage with them. And so a lot of my training is based off that now, even though it's not necessarily like basketball specific, it's still kind of specific to some of those mental pieces. And I like doing that in high jump too. I do stuff with high jump, usually jump over one bar. I do a lot of stuff where I'll hold an extra bar in front, or I'll put like an extra hurdle. So you have to jump over two things. And a lot of the kids who are a little more fearful sometimes, like they're kind of like, I don't know, it forces you just to go for it. So it's it kind of works its way into my coaching in multiple arenas.
Yeah. No, talking about hurdle, I have such a fear with box jumping because when I was a high school athlete, at my trainer, it was a metal like wooden box, and we would just raise it and I cracked my shins on it 2 or 3 times so bad, like bloody shins from jumping on this box. So I have less fear trying to dunk on somebody right now than I would be jumping on a high box, just because I had some bad experiences in high school.
Yeah, those box jumps, man. I mean, yeah, the ones that are like hard and gnarly, like they could mess you up. I was just thinking about like a general adaptation. Mark McLaughlin, who was on this podcast a few episodes ago, had said he made an investment of like bringing a hoop into just the gym, like just general training. And I just think that's one of the best. If you can get like, if you had 10 pieces of equipment in your gym, I think a hoop should absolutely be one of them. There's just something about that that you can like, pit players against each other. Like you're the blocker, you're the dunker, set it up to different things. And yeah, just working that thing, that it's hard to say, but it's fearlessness, and it's like, it's aggression, fearlessness, and coordination all wrapped up in one.
I did an experiment not too long ago. I just wanted to see what would happen. So our rims are always at 10 feet and we're on a full 94-foot basketball court. And one of the days I'm like, I'm just going to lower this rim and see what happens and not say anything. And because I had an idea of what would happen. And so the rim on the other side, I lowered it to, 8.6 or 9 or whatever it was. And what happened. These kids came in and I didn't have to say anything. And the sessions are staggered an hour away. Kids get there a little bit early and I don't have to say anything. What are the kids doing? They are over there dunking. Yes. Then they get together and then they're throwing lobs to each other. Then they're throwing it off the backboard and then they're going through their legs and then they're trying to dunk on each other. I didn't have to say a thing. And it starts with one kid going over there. Low rim over here. I think I could dunk. Boom. And then it just feeds and feeds and feeds. And it's like, I don't want to rob kids of that, whatever. Yeah. That's the experience that I want these kids to have in my gym. And I don't want to get in the way of that. Right. I want to celebrate that. I want to push that. And I never even said anything. But obviously I'm talking with my trainers in the gym and we're like, look, that's it. That's the most valuable thing they could have done today. Right? How many? And they'll get 400 reps, like some ridiculous amount of reps jumping, and I didn't even have to. If I didn't want to that day, we could have never even started the session. They would have been down there for an hour, and it would have been very, very beneficial for them.
Yeah, yeah. And you think about how so many, obviously, people have great genetic talent, but you also think, well, how did you get to this place later? And I'm sure a lot of times it's that, like, hey, just low rim, dunk with your buddies, like that kind of thing, all sorts of, and I know a lot of people who are pro dunkers, you see them on low rims when they're younger, just having fun, trying to do all sorts of stuff.
They're on low rims now. That's how they learn new dunks. Pro dunkers now are on low rims. It's like the same mindset, honestly, of taking the thought of the finish away, right? You removed a barrier, right? You removed a fear, but I can't dunk on 10. The last thing you want to do if you can't dunk is go try to dunk on a 10-foot rim and just fail and look stupid in front of others, right? So by bringing them down, you're meeting the athlete where they're at, right? And then it's like, it's fun again. It's exciting again. I get positive feedback, right? I missed it, but it's like I was trying something cool, right? And that's like I want to like low rim dunking is it's hard to beat that
It
for just
is.
what it does.
Yeah, it makes me almost think about, like, my mind goes to like donor sports and free play. And there was a really good, Kevin Mulcahy had posted this on Twitter. There was a study done on, I think it was like Premier League soccer players or professional soccer players in England, or maybe it was Scotland. And they were defensive players, and they went through their whole history. Like, when did you start playing? How many hours of practice, or years of practice, or whatever have you had? And those things actually didn't make the difference. What moved the needle was how many hours of free play those athletes got when they were kids. That is amazing, because that is like completely opposite of so many things that we think, oh, you got to get started earlier, do this technique earlier, and I'm going to coach you into it, and I'm going to tell you what to do, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, nope, and like you said, like what you just said about your practice, and even outside the low rim, the way you let your practices go is so much, it's play-based, it's explorative based. It lets the kids, it looks just as much playing in so many times as it does like, all right, you're going to hold the ball like this or whatever. And it reminds me too of like what Jeremy Frisch had said about, before the kids roll in and they start their sessions, the boys are wrestling each other, they're playing tag, like how much it's like just to give space to see that happen. That should inspire you as the coach and give you ideas too of what do they love and how are they solving these problems and being athletic.
I see that, right? And the low rim experiment. It's like the worst thing I could do. That, all right, line up, pull your knee to your chest, like that. Completely like that. That's literally the worst thing I could possibly do. Right. Let's feed that. Let's not ruin that.
Yeah. Yes. I think so much of what we think about as coaching, it's almost like 99, probably 0.9% doing things. Here's things to do. And no one talks about observing anything, like for me, just watching kids play before practice, like all that stuff. That's a huge like source of inspiration for how we learn and move. And then the dynamic pieces as well. I was kind of thinking, if this was just like a general gym, what if you had a gym? It's like, okay, here's couple low rims in one part. Here's maybe some like soccer goals, like just like little ones, like futsal goals set up, soccer ball. Here's like some parkour stuff, ninja stuff over here. Like how, and just go. Yeah, here's a wrestling mat.
Sounds like a good gym.
Oh my gosh, it'd be crazy.
Yeah.
So
if I wasn't training basketball players, I look at Austin Yoakum, Jeremy Frey, Rhett, what's his name? Reassures.
Larson, yeah, Rhett Larson.
Yeah, Rhett. Yeah. I want like that. I love all of it. Like that's what it should be.
Yeah, it's and I think too as well, not just there's also something to doing that, yourself as a coach too. I think a lot of times coaches, they kind of get into either their plate is so full they don't have too much time, or there's not time made to train much in general. But even the training it's done, a lot of times it's only okay, well, it's just like, all right, let's just knock this quick lifting workout out. That's it. And there's never a chance to explore, do something that's pushing you to your own edge of your ability in something, in some way, shape, or form. It doesn't necessarily, I don't think, have to be full blown athlete mode, but at least somewhere, explore something, find something to push that involves multiple aspects.
I'm looking for the motivation to go full-blown athlete mode, because I still play all the time. We jump in with our college guys and we played 3-on-3 for an hour and a half last, like really highly competitive, like basketball. And it's like, I'm still there. It's like I can still do this. I know if I was able to prioritize this a little bit more, like I'm still there. And it's so, with me and Ross, who's works with me, we talk about it all the time. It's like that is where I'm connected when I'm in there and I'm jumping in and I'm going through it. That sense of I'm still in this with them. I'm still experiencing what they're experiencing, and it makes me such a better coach that I can't lose that. And it's so hard to keep it, but I keep it. It is a priority of mine. I am still done. And I know it's like, I don't want to jump in today. I jump in. I'm going through this class. We're playing. Because it is easy. It's easy. I can go to, get my lift in and whatever, but that's not what I need. That is not what I need. I need to still be in the arena.
Yeah. I think that is such an underrated piece, because there's intuition and inputs that I just don't think you can get elsewhere. You can't force it. It's kind of like nature. It's like you can't make yourself fall asleep. It's kind of the same thing. You have to just get the inputs and you have to let things happen. And I probably mentioned this on the podcast. There's just a good story about like Johnny Cash, I think it was. He's like, I couldn't necessarily just sit down and write. And there is something that you're okay, every day, 8 o'clock or 10 o'clock, I'm going. But he had said like once like the best work was after he spent like the day in nature just walking around the day before. And it's like that, letting that input just kind of soak in the system, and then a new output could grow. And I just don't think, and I know life is stressful now. It's harder to find time sometimes for things with things on your plate, but I just think those inputs are invaluable because so much we talk about, okay, you read this article, this podcast, this book, this manual, this course, but like, and that's awesome. But a huge part of that is, well, hey, what did you do for yourself? Like, did you spend time playing? Did you spend time in nature or observing things, observing animals or watching kids play or whatever it is, I think those inputs are so important. I know I was going to, oh yeah, if you had something too, I was also going to ask you about your time in nature. Cause I talked to you a lot.
That's what I was going to say. You're highlighting two things that I prioritize in my life. And I spent, getting into this, it was 10 years of certifications, reading, listening to your podcast, all of this. And let's say the last 2 years has been more of that observing, right? I haven't been reading as much. I haven't been listening to as much, training podcasts. A lot of my friends, I talk training all the time. We do it, but it's like, it has shifted from me acquiring more knowledge, me reading more, like stuff like that. And it has shifted more into me just observing more and maybe using everything I've learned over the last 10 years and just trying to see, what still makes sense out of all the things that have gone into my brain. What still makes sense? What do I still deem important? And like my best thoughts, are I every single day I drive a half hour out. I'm in northern New Jersey in the suburbs. I drive 35 minutes west towards Pennsylvania. I've got a nice spot there. I'm not telling anybody where it is because I'm generally alone, right? And I bring my dog, and I'm spent phone in the truck, and there's some open fields, there's streams, there's lakes, and I am just there walking with my dog, observing her as she runs. She's a purebred hunting dog, hundreds of years of genetics, and watching her, move, and that's my best thought. And then the other best thinking I do is after I compete. Last night, we're getting in the car, I'm driving home, and it's like my brain is going.
Yeah.
It is going. Yeah, I felt it, experienced it. It evoked something within me, right? To, just, yeah, good. I think it's things that force you into the present moment, and
Yes.
we are so constantly distracted. You know what I do, on social media and everything I do, and it's like I'm excelling at that, but I think I excel at that because I have prioritized things that counteract that. I have prioritized time with family. I have prioritized time in nature, time in silence, time in present moment, competing. When I'm in the gym working with athletes, I am tuned in to them.
Yeah, it's so crucial. You mentioned silence too. I mean, that's another one. I mean, it's if there's no silence in your day, everything's just noise, which it's very easy for that to be. I also think it's hard for the mind to, because I think a lot of times those times like post game or whatever, for me, it's always post workout. Like this is probably bad. It kind of cramps my workout vibe sometimes, but like I have my up note or my like notes open because it's like I just thought of all this stuff and I have to write it down. And that's where most of my notes come in, is on the tail end of that. And without those inputs, as well as practice, a lot of times coming home from practice, it's like voice notes, but it's definitely, the end of the training session and the silence there, that everything is just going. And so I think that is so important.
Yeah.
I know we have
everything.
Yeah, seven values, and we don't have to go through all of them. If there's some that relate particularly to what we were talking about, maybe feel free to highlight those. But at least you get an overview of some of those core values and how they work into the practice structure.
We wanted to. This actually came about from trying to kind of. I have an app, and it's trying to get players better, but its demographic is high school basketball players, and we wanted more of like a hand holding process to kind of meet these athletes where they're at and show them, principles that they can infuse into their training or their journey to wherever they're trying to go. So we came up with this, and we have these steps that they're going to go through. And the framework is 7 different steps, 7 different, let's call them principles. And the first one is simple: accountability, right? There needs to be some form of accountability to how much your time you can put in, right? Do you have accountability from others, right? You can look at accountability in a lot of different ways, but you have to be accountable to something, right? It can't just be unharnessed creativity spread out in 100 different directions. There has to be some sort of focus, which can be brought in through accountability. And then edge of ability, we talked about the entire time, right? Are you training at the edge of your ability in the beginning? The edge of your ability is easy to find as you progress, right? You may need you might need a coach, you might need somebody other than yourself. A lot of times it's hard for us to see where we lack, right? And what used to serve you may no longer still serve you. I shot 1,000 shots a day, every single day. When I started playing basketball, I was getting up 1,000 shots a day with my dad in the beginning. That served me. What did I get really good at? Right. Well, I did get better at shooting, right? But I got really good at shooting alone with my dad in the park. I never shot in the game. I was scared to shoot in the game. But to get better at shooting the game, what did I do? I reverted back to the thing that used to serve me, right? That at one time was the edge of ability, but that was no longer the edge of my ability. I got comfortable shooting with my dad. I had to progress further into the thing that I was actually struggling about. And that's kind of the art of understanding edge of ability. We have effortlessness that comes down. I don't care. Look at any type of high level performer. There is an effortlessness about them, whether it's Tiger Woods swinging a golf club, Steph Curry shooting a jump shot, Michael Jordan gliding through the air. That's effortlessness. And how do we, it's not all max effort, more force through the ground. There's a degree of flow. There's a degree of effortlessness. And that is something we want to consider. Specificity, right? All right, you got a 40-inch vert. What happens? You want to be a basketball player. What happens with the ball in your hand? That's a small example, right? But it's, again, you can become the most athletic person on the planet, but if your goal is to be a better basketball player, right, we need to do things specific to the sport. We need to excel. We need to be able to play the sport, right? That matters. And I used it again, an example of jumping, but we can tie that into many different facets of the game. Vision. I think I ask one of my top players, what's important to you about basketball, right? I want to buy my mom a house someday. He wants to play in the NBA. He's got a huge vision, right? And you have something of that magnitude. You have a vision of that magnitude. Very, very important. And I think any player that is in any sport that has reached a pinnacle level, right, had a massive vision, right? Mm-hmm. And then the next one is overcoming fear. I had a massive vision. I wanted to play professional basketball. I was not willing to take that step into the unknown. I was not willing to overcome the fear, right, that matched the vision that I was trying to get to, right? And then the last one is creativity, right? Mm-hmm. We have all this stuff now. We went through it, and the last one is creativity. Find some time where you can just create, where you can try things, where you're willing to experiment. And now we boil all those up and we kind of infuse that into, I don't care what it is, mm-hmm. but now we have principles that we want to check. We want to hit these things. Yeah, that's it.
I think
I do.
It was awesome. I think we touched on a lot of those already. The one thing of the ones that we didn't, well, I will say too, I just, the edge of ability hits me like personally so much just because I was like, I would always go in my backyard and just shoot around, just lone wolf, individual. And that got me to a certain level of being able to hit like a decent mid-range jumper. Even 3-pointers though, I had the ability, it was just fear. Just like the same thing as jumping over the chair. It was kind of whatever that thing was, it was the same thing. But it's like, I didn't know how to take that beyond. Honestly, if I would have had a neighborhood with a bunch of kids around, to play constantly, I think I would have been in a better place for that, but it's just interesting to think of. But the thing I'm glad you brought up effortlessness. That's something that I mean, like I said, like the mental piece every year more and more, but I think the effortless piece is kind of the same thing because I almost look at it in the sense of not whatever the opposite of effortlessness is, like clunky, like rigid. Rigid is also tied into fear. There's something that you're fearful of that you're trying too hard willfully to make up for. And there was in the track world, I like watch sometimes. I'm coaching track or high school track now, high jump, and so I'll watch like high jumping on my like lunch breaks and stuff. And there's one jumper, women's jumper, if you want to see effortlessness, and I look at it as facial expressions when the person is jumping. I started coaching back when I got done at Cal and moved across the country here in Ohio. I coached for a year at a high school high jump as well. And I would watch the facial expressions of a lot of these kids as they jumped over the bar. And you just saw all sorts like pained expressions or like striving or like, it was very interesting to me. And then, but in the pro level and elite, you actually do get a little bit of that, But in the best jumpers, it's just so cool because they're almost like enjoying the ride. Like they're enjoying the spring in their body. And it's I think she was the gold medalist in Tokyo, Yaroslava Mahucic. She's just like, she looks like she's so like just relaxed. Like her face, there's no like wrinkles that show up. It's just like chilling out and enjoying the spring in her body as she goes over the bar. That's something I watch a lot more now because it impacts things, and it weaves into how I coach like plyometrics and things like that. And there's something that's like kind of just from like this just being the jump space, but there's something that's really cool about, hey, don't just do this set of bounds, feel the spring in your foot and just go with it for this set of single leg hops, versus, hey, I really want you to drive your knee up on this or whatever it is, it's like that effortless piece. So sometimes you could start there and then everything else can almost build off of that. And I'm sure how much more in the game of basketball, but not only is it you, it's other people, it's plays, it's way more opportunities to make this way less, of a smooth thing than would be possible.
Yeah. I mean, how often are athletes making the focus smooth? Mm-hmm. I just want to do this smooth. Smooth movement is indicative of skilled movement, right? It is. So that's why the best athletes look smooth. That's why the best jump shooters have a jump shot that is visually pleasing. It is smooth, right? It is smooth. Now, how do we get there? That's a longer conversation, but I think just start with talking to younger athletes or athletes in general and having time in their training, whatever plan or whatever it is, where there is a focus on effortlessness. There's a focus on being smooth. It could be breath. We could bring it into so many different aspects and look at it in so many different lights. But just that idea of effortlessness should be intertwined with training.
Yeah, it's such good stuff. That list. I mean, I wrote it down, and it's definitely going in my up note here as soon as I'm done with this podcast. I had a couple just kind of like, I guess, lightning round questions.
I got a shout out. Ross Greenfield came up. He's actually a doctor of physical therapy. Ross Greenfield. He's my partner on this whole thing. Give him the credit for that list.
Oh, awesome. I love it. I'll have to put something. Is there something like that I could put in the show notes too? Hopefully, if you guys have it written down somewhere, or otherwise I'll just maybe try to get something like that. I just think it's so good. I mean, it's something that I'll be thinking about, probably infusing and thinking about those boxes in track practice or coaching. Even, I mean, youth soccer, it's a little different. It's like, you kids are way too tense. You 6-year-olds need to lighten up or whatever. But it's so good. I had a couple lightning round questions for you. The one you mentioned, which was the hunting and just kind of what you do when you're not coaching. I had a couple others, and those one was, what's one thing that you've learned this past year that's had a substantial impact on your coaching process currently?
Can I go back to the hunting one real quick?
Oh, yeah, please do. Yeah.
You said that's something I do, and I don't just do anything. Yeah. It's not who it's something that I am highly obsessive over, and it has spawned this entire almost separate life that I have and a separate group of people. I have driven to Idaho and back 4 times, right? Mm-hmm. Hunting. I've gone to Nebraska. I've traveled all over the world, and then I got the dog. The amount I've spent doing this with the dog. We've talked about nature. I take everything to the nth degree, and the hunting and the dogs and the training and all of that, and it is something it's more than something I do.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, I should have. I wish I should have found a new way to reframe that question, but I love it. It's like if there's anything worth doing, it's worth obsessing over at some point and making that a huge part of your process.
Yeah, like I don't just train my dog. I want that dog. My relationship with Piper, my dog is special. It's something really cool to me. And I'm always trying to draw from other I train basketball players, but I draw from so many different places, and whether it's there's so many aspects of hunting and dog and upland hunting that I draw from that assist me in the way I approach training basketball players. Not going to get into them all now, but maybe that's another podcast because I'm always looking to extrapolate from other things outside the thing that I'm actually doing.
Yeah, I'll have to I know Chris Corfist was talking about that on one of his presentations, and I think Cal Dietz as well. Like dogs, like if they're running or hunting in the woods, talk about fear. There's no fear. Like talk about like jumping over something to dunk. Like a dog's been past that a long time ago. Like they would be the ultimate.
Yeah.
Like they're 11 out of 10 at that stuff. It's so cool to
Oh, and
learn.
it start bringing in like the whole breeding process and genetics and all this into it,
Hmm.
and how dogs are. It's insane. And then I start, well, how much of his genetic nature it gets me into, I just spiral with things and trying to relate it back to humans and things. But anyway, we can go to the next question.
Yeah. So one thing you've learned in the past year that's had a substantial impact in your own coaching.
Um, we talked about it before, but the one was stepping back and observing more. Um, as a byproduct of starting the online business, right? A lot of my focus shifted to that, and in order for that to happen, I had to have my first bit, my gym, right? I had to have a lot of responsibilities, delegated there from the day to day to all of this. But as a byproduct of that, and stepping back a little bit to my emotional attachment to my baby, my gym, and just being able to step back and observe, I'm becoming a better coach, a guide, trainer, human, whatever you want to call me. And I didn't see that happening, and it didn't happen by design. It was like, I'm going to go pursue this thing right now. This thing runs pretty well. And now it's like, I love going to the gym now. It's like, I don't have that day to day responsibility of showing up and telling everybody what to do and running. I still do. I'm just, I'm running whatever, 4 or 5 sessions a week, but it's not 15, it's not 20, it's not 40 like it was years ago. And I just get to observe more and watch. And now even, my daughter, she's a year and a half old right now, Remy, watching her and, how quick mom is to correct or, don't do that. You're going to, break your foot if you drop it. And I'm like, she's fine. Like, let me just watch and observe and let her take that time to, figure it out on her own at 18 months. That's been really cool. Another one, I had an experience last year. I didn't even tell anybody this. I lived in Idaho for 4 months on 2 separate trips, and I worked with a family. So I was working with the same 3 to 5 kids every single day for an extended amount of time. And I cannot approach that the same way I approach training kids that, come to my gym once a week or twice a week. And, lines that I draw in my gym when I'm working with athletes once or twice, I had to approach that differently because it became almost, more, it was a tighter knit thing, just being there with that extended amount of time, working with the same kids day in and day out for, 2 months straight. Like, I can't approach that the same way I approach other things, and how I have to, be a little more forgiving, be a little funny. There has to be more time for, just get whatever downtime, stillness, and it can't be high energy all the time, every single day.
Mm-hmm.
I can't just be trainer Bobby, show up, you're here for an hour, I'm giving you the best hour of your life. Right. Like that wasn't it. So that was a cool experience for me. And it was hard for me because like I am very like that. Like I want it high energy. I want it highly focused. I want progress happening. I want to see it. But the reality is these are, 12, 13-year-old kids I was training out there. And, we can lighten up a little bit. And some days aren't going to be as good as others. It's okay.
Yeah. I think sometimes the impression we get, probably maybe just social media and the internet, it's kind of like this, is we get the impression that everyone's hustling all the time. Like people don't typically post, yeah, I'm just chilling and reflecting right now. And if you were chilling and reflecting, you wouldn't want to have the phone or whatever anywhere near you, And so it's something that we don't outright think of, but it's so critical.
Well, I don't post the most important things in my life.
Yeah.
Like I don't share. Like that's whatever you see on there, like that. You're not seeing who you're not seeing the most important things in my life. You're not. It's a game that I enjoy. It's what I'm doing, and it's good, but it's not. I'm not sharing the most important things to me.
Yeah, I think that should be like a little caveat or tagline with a lot of like social media accounts, a little banner, like not the most important thing. Not how it is all the time.
I lived in Idaho for 4 months, and I didn't talk about it, which I think is crazy.
Yeah. Last question here. If you're coaching, if you were coaching in an organization right now, so it was Scholastic, like NBA, NCAA, high school, middle school, like any organization to coach in, you're vaulted into one of those right now. Which would you pick, and why would you pick
NBA?
It? Yeah.
NBA, 100%, no questions asked. Throw me to the wolves. I want to see what happens. That's it. It would be the less. I would have the least confidence going into that. Not that I wouldn't be confident. I would just be the least confident doing that because I haven't been in that world. I've worked with lots of college athletes. I've worked with professional athletes overseas, coaching overseas and all that. But, I haven't been in the NBA arena. I'd like to think I would do very good job and use the principles we talked about before into that. And what I actually end up doing might be a little bit differently than I do now, but I think I would adhere to the same principles and beliefs that I have and apply it to that demographic. It would be an exciting opportunity. And I'd like to, put my money where my mouth is and go, all right, let's go.
I love it. Yeah, edge of ability. Like, yeah, speak of the edge of ability for sure. So I love that.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
No,
Yeah.
I lived so much of my life not taking that step, not being anywhere close to the edge, believing, having a vision that I was capable. I was just never willing to take that step. And now I see opportunities like that. I don't even let the fear creep in. Right? Let's say this was real and this was happening, it's like I say yes to opportunities like that. I don't think about it. Yes.
I love it. Well, hey, that's a great way to close this out, Bobby. It was awesome talking to you, man. Every time we chat, I really enjoy these. So thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate you being on.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thanks for tuning in to another show. I appreciate you being here. If you want to help out the podcast, you can leave it a rating or review on iTunes, Spotify, whatever you're listening to the show on. I would absolutely appreciate it, and I will see you next week.